Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Loud and clear. All right, so now that we got this set up, just going to say this to everyone that is listening. Welcome to Sperging Time. This is the very first broadcast. I am your host, Matt Bear, also known as Jarl Beargrove, and today I have my very first guest, Cody Williams. How you doing today?
I'm all right. How are you?
I'm doing all right myself. Now I understand before I got this podcast set up that you and I kind of talked a little bit, and you said you was wanting to talk more about politics. Is that right?
Yeah, we can talk about politics. I can talk about books and movies and stuff too.
That's awesome because this podcast, although it does say improv on the category on Anchor, this is really just a general podcast. We can really talk about anything. It's just raw, unedited conversation. So we can literally talk about anything.
That's cool.
All right. So just a quick question. I noticed you did run for office. Just to clarify, was it for state House of Representatives or was it just representatives in general?
The U.S.
I just
House.
can't remember. I'm
It
sorry.
was the U.S. House of Representatives.
Oh, nice. And I do understand that you are running again. Is that correct? Or you
Uh,
plan on it?
I don't know. I don't know yet. It's still a bit early to make that decision because the next election will be next year.
Right.
So I haven't,
So
I haven't, I haven't made that decision quite yet.
right, I understand you. So in case you do decide to run again, would you mind just telling us what your platform is, what you run for, what's your primary issues, what you seek to change in the U.S. House of Representatives?
Sure. I think the number one issue in general is money in politics. And it doesn't really
Hmm.
matter what political party you're in, they're both corrupt.
Hmm.
And every issue ties back to that. I am for Medicare for all. Well, we can't really do that, not even with a democratically controlled House, because they're all bought by the insurance companies. I'm for ending our illegal and offensive wars overseas.
Hmm.
And we can't really do that right now either because they're all bought by the military industrial complex. I'm for the legalization, the tax, the legalization, tax, and regulation of drugs. We can't really do that because of the big prison system, and it's a. But I think every issue ties back to the money in politics and the corruption of our politicians. That's why when I ran, I sort of ran as a I ran as a Republican. I ran in the Republican primary,
Mm.
which was a bit odd. It turned some heads because I'm politically a progressive, and usually if you're a progressive, you're running the Democratic Party or the Green Party. Um, but I ran mostly as a Republican because we live in a red state, and I figured it would be maybe easier to get um, those ideas over. And I also think that one of the mistakes Democratic politicians make nowadays is they focus so much on social justice issues, and I don't want to discount those issues. I think they're very important, but they're not relatable to the broader um, political to the broader population. Uh, Economic populism is the key. One of my biggest influences in politics, Kyle Kalinske, he always says it's the populism, stupid, as to the rise of Bernie and the rise of Trump, even though he turned out to be a fake populist. It's the populism. And economic populism affects everybody, not just one demographic.
Right. I mean, I agree wholeheartedly, and I'm glad you mentioned Kyle Kalinske because back during the 2016, the primaries for the 2016 election, I did kind of get exposed to a secular talk or Kyle Kalinski's a YouTube channel. And although I disagree with him on a good number of things, at the very core, like just like you said, ending all the illegal wars overseas halfway across the world and legalization of drugs, like for example marijuana and stuff like that. I do agree with him on, even though I'm even though I consider myself a right leaning libertarian, like more center right.
Yeah. Well,
But
and I think
and
that
I'm also glad. Oh, I'm sorry.
no, go ahead, go ahead.
I'm also glad that you mentioned some other things on your platform because a lot of some of those things did remind me of one of the Democrats that I would have gotten behind if she were if she had somehow secured the nomination, Tulsi Gabbard. I don't know why. I just absolutely love her because she wants to end all the illegal wars, and I, I believe she did or she does advocate for kind of Medicare for all, which again, you said ties back into money and politics, as all things do, and that's another thing. Whether you're a libertarian, whether you're a demsoc or whatever you want to call yourself, I'm pretty sure we can all agree that money and politics does kind of control everything. It's like the whole reason why legalization isn't federally legalized is because of money and politics, like special interest groups, such as like the textile industries, the pharmaceutical industries, the prison industries, and for some out there, they may not know it, but yes, it's actually a thing.
Right.
And that's really the main battle that should be fought is against money in politics, whether it's from just big industries or China or whomever.
Yeah, and that's also a winning issue. It goes back to the populism thing.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody, it doesn't matter where you fall on the political spectrum, everybody recognizes that money and politics is a big issue and probably the number one issue because it
Mm-hmm.
affects pretty much everything. And I love Tulsi Gabbard. I thought she was a great candidate, and she was sort of dealt a raw hand
Definitely.
in 2020. Bernie was too, and I like Andrew Yang. I thought Andrew Yang was dealt pretty bad hand.
Yeah, at first I was kind of skeptical of Andrew Yang, but the more I listened to him, like on Joe Rogan's podcast, the more I did kind of start to agree with him, like the whole universal basic income thing. Like the concept at first I didn't really agree with, but his reasoning for it I did agree with because let's face it, in a more capitalist kind of economy, you need consumers. China knew this, and other countries like Vietnam knew this too. That's why they pretty much adopted a few capitalist policies.
Yeah,
And if the consumers have more spending power, that's more that they can do to stimulate said economy. At least that's my understanding of it.
right. And the thing is, that's like with really this pandemic thing has sort of put us into a second Great Depression. It just
Hmm.
doesn't look like it from a market perspective because Congress bailed out the corporations first and they artificially lifted up the market
Hmm.
because but really the only way the market can really thrive without just Congress flooding endless supplies of money into it is if you have to put money in the pockets of the consumers.
Exactly.
And that's like Henry Ford. He paid his workers pretty well for the time, and his reasoning was he wants them to be able to buy a Ford.
Hmm.
And I think that's the way it ought to be. And that sort of also bleeds into the trickle down economic theory that I think has proven to fail with
Right. The whole Reaganomics thing.
Reaganomics. Yes, and they just keep trying it.
Right. I mean, I do agree a lot with that. I forgot where I was going to go with this, but yeah. And case in point is just Andrew Yang's reasoning for advocating for the $1,000 a month or what have you is again it goes back to consumers having more power to spend and therefore stimulate the economy. Speaking about 2020 though, it has been 2020, 2021, like this whole coronavirus pandemic period has been rather interesting market wise because we also did see a surge at the very least in investing cryptocurrencies, and we had the whole GameStop stock thing, which, if you ask me, was kind of funny because it's more or less the people sticking it to the hedgies.
Yeah.
And you also have more people investing in materials such as gold, which I kind of plan on doing. I kind of plan on investing in gold and crypto. I just have to get started on that at some point.
Right.
And speaking about the raw hands that both Bernie and Tulsi Gabbard have been dealt, um, I do agree that there was a good bit of backstage politics going on in the 2020 election, especially when it came to Tulsi Gabbard, because it's just like hell. I'm sure you saw this too. The very first debate where Tulsi Gabbard just blew Kamala Harris out of the water to the point where Kamala couldn't even debate the point. Basically, she had to wait until Tulsi had already left, and she went on CNN or MSNBC, whichever it was, and started the whole Tulsi Gabbard's Assad apologist, which is a bullshit if you ask me.
Oh,
And anyone that can put two and two together will tell you that.
yeah.
But that's a whole other can of worms.
Yeah. Gabbard, they were a lot more aggressively against Tulsi Gabbard than they were against Bernie, in the sense that they were just more forward with their aggression towards Tulsi Gabbard. But
Exactly.
she wasn't polling very well. Everyone pretty much knew Bernie was going to make a run for it, so they couldn't make it blatantly obvious that they were
Right.
from the start. But Tulsi wasn't polling very well, and she, yeah, and same goes with Andrew Yang as well. They also couldn't be as aggressive towards Elizabeth Warren, but I don't really like Elizabeth Warren personally.
I never really have liked her, to be completely honest.
I thought at one time she was going to be okay. I thought she was going to be okay when she first announced running, but she used some very sleazy tactics against Bernie.
Oh, she really did.
Like the whole him saying a woman can't be president thing, which I don't believe that actually ever happened.
Nah, the way I see it, there's like no physical proof of any kind, whether it's video or audio, of him saying that. It's just like the whole when the Atlantic was running with the story about Trump calling the fallen veterans the suckers and losers thing. There was never any physical evidence to back that up. Therefore, in my view, it's kind of a myth at best.
Yeah, but and when she went, I remember this happened after one debate. I don't remember which debate it was, but she went over to him because he said on the debate stage that he didn't say that. And she went over to him and called him out for, quote, calling her a liar. And MSNBC acted, because the debate was on MSNBC, they acted like they didn't know that Mike was live. Are you kidding? They didn't know that was planted.
Yeah, there's no way that anyone can say they didn't know that. They knew that. They were just trying to, do some damage control.
Yeah. And that was, I personally believe that was a plant. I think that Elizabeth Warren was told to go over there and do that, and Elizabeth Warren fell in line like she does all the time. And she was always the kind of person who, I never really questioned Tulsi Gabbard's convictions, and I never really questioned Bernie's either. I think Bernie's biggest problem is he's too damn gullible.
Yeah, he really
he believes that they are acting in good faith when they're just not.
Right. I mean, that's part of how I see this whole thing with Bernie.
So naive.
Also, I just don't think he was really as ruthless as far as the debate stage went, because there were plenty of times where he could have absolutely grilled Joe Biden or Pete Buttigieg or whomever. There were plenty of times where he could have absolutely grilled him, but he didn't.
Yeah, he softened over time. I think that's clear. If you go back and you watch old footage of him, he has softened over time. And I don't know. We can sit here and debate all day why he softened over time. I don't think anybody knows one way or another. it might be because he does legitimately like Joe Biden. That might be the reason. Who knows?
Yeah, that's a whole other can of worms to open up, and that in itself could take about an hour or
Yeah.
two to discuss.
And I don't really want to go into that anyway, because it doesn't really
Right.
matter. It doesn't really matter. He was gullible and he got duped.
Yeah.
So
And speaking about this again, this ties back to the whole money and politics thing. Speaking more about Tulsi Gabbard, and I'm going to also reference Bernie like 2016 wise, because 2016 primaries, anyone that's anyone that can say that the DNC didn't collude with the media or that the powers that be, whatever you want to call it, didn't have a hand in tipping the scales to Hillary's favor. Anyone that tries to say that to me, I would just shut them down really quick because there's plenty of evidence to suggest that yes, there was a lot of tipping the scales going on. I mean, it's been come out in the years. That's why the whole WikiLeaks thing happened. The whole thing with Julian
yeah,
Assange is because the emails that were leaked was evidence that the DNC was colluding with the Clinton campaign and the media to try to screw Sanders as much as possible, and it
yeah.
worked.
Well,
Hate to say it, but
the
it worked.
emails revealed that um, MSNBC was essentially just another arm of the Clinton campaign,
Hmm.
and I remember reading in those emails about how they tried to atheist shame Bernie Sanders in the Midwest.
I remember
They
that.
tried to atheist shame this old Jewish guy, and I don't know, it just because I remember there being a debate question about that, like what's your relationship with God or something, as if that's relevant.
I do remember that.
Yeah, as if that's
Yeah, I mean,
relevant.
yeah, it's just the whole play into the demographic thing,
Yeah,
and they pulled it off. I hate to say it, but they did.
yeah,
But yeah, and you also got to look at sure, Tulsi Gabbard wasn't the best at polling averages, but there were plenty of polls that did have Tulsi Gabbard at least 5% and above. But because the DNC and really the DNC and both Republican conventions, they both do this because what happened to Sanders in 2016 was pretty much exactly what happened to Ron Paul back in 2012. And if I was 18 at that election, I would have voted for Ron Paul, but I was 17, so I just barely missed it. But
yeah.
back to Tulsi Gabbard,
Out of all
you
Republicans,
also,
I did like Ron Paul, but again, he's more
yeah,
libertarian in it anyway.
he really kind of catapulted the libertarian way of thinking into more of the mainstream. It's not really as mainstream as it should be, in my opinion, because you still got all these boomer Republicans and Dixiecrats that still have a lot of power, especially in
Yeah,
Congress. But Ron Paul was really he really did catapult the libertarian way of thinking into a more broad demographic. And really, Ron Paul was kind of the reason I became a libertarian in the first place because to me, everything he said on the campaign trail made absolute perfect sense.
yeah,
Just like a lot of what Tulsi Gabbard and some of what Bernie said back then, even today, made sense about ending the wars, decriminalizing or legalizing marijuana, and abolishing private prisons, and all that mumbo jumbo.
yeah. Well, the thing with Bernie is he, if he isn't even able, and this is just my opinion, if he isn't even able to call out Joe Biden for bombing Syria, then he probably wouldn't have been a very effective president anyway.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
So I don't know. It's sort of heartbreaking, really, because I personally was a big Bernie guy. Got Bernie stickers all over my car, which I need to take off at some point. I'm just too lazy.
Yeah, I can relate.
Um, and that was just sort of demoralizing in a way, that loss, because that was such an organized um that was just so organized how they went after him, because
Hmm.
there were reports that Barack Obama called Amy Klobuchar and Mayor Pete and sort of influenced them to drop out right before Super Tuesday. And they did drop out. I think the Sunday before, Sunday and Monday, they dropped out.
Yeah. Yeah, it was like right before
And
Super
Elizabeth
Tuesday.
Warren stayed in, which for some reason took some of Bernie's progressive voters.
Yep, it siphoned a good bit of Bernie's
Yeah,
votes.
I don't understand it, but that's the reality. And
It was just part of the plan, if you ask me.
yeah, it was so organized. And I'm still personally pissed at Obama for that. I was never really a big Obama fan anyway.
Yeah, I mean, when I first heard of the whole Obama thing back at the 2008 election, I was only like 13, and I was just kind of getting into politics, kind of going down the whole rabbit hole of corruption and how government and stuff really works. Um, and because I was raised a Democrat, I did root for him back then. But knowing what I know now, that's kind of kind of a bad thing because. But then again, you also you didn't really have much of an option either way. You had Obama, which at the time you didn't know really what to expect.
Yeah.
He ran on the whole hope and change gimmick, and you also had John McCain, which in my opinion was just it would have just been another 8 years of Bush, which we didn't need that to begin
He
with.
was.
Everyone that was alive back then should know how horrible that administration
Yeah.
was.
I think if I had been able to vote in 2008 with all my knowledge now, without what happened during the Obama administration. I mean, if I still had my same political beliefs and I was naive after the 8 years of Bush, I probably would have voted for Obama in 2008. But after I saw how that first term went, I probably wouldn't have. I would have voted Green Party most likely.
Yeah, if I was at that point, knowing what I know now, I probably would have either wrote in Ron Paul or I would have voted some kind of third party. Probably
Which I get
libertarian.
I get a lot of flack for voting Green Party because I voted Green Party in 2016 and I voted for Howie Hawkins in 2020. So, I get criticized for that. But
Yeah, I've gotten my fair share of flack for voting for Johnson back then. Oh well, we got a storm brewing.
Yeah, it was starting to thunder when I walked outside earlier.
Right. Yeah, it was kind of. It's been brewing since last night because I went to the gym around midnight and it was raining somewhat hard. But yeah, I guess now we're getting the eye of it. I guess.
Let's sort of off and on all
and
day.
Also, yeah. But just some other things that are kind of fresh now. Now that you mentioned the whole bombing Syria thing, which Obama did, Trump continued that, and now Biden's doing the same. Do you think it would be unreasonable to state that bombing Syria thing was kind of a mea culpa for speaking out against the Prince of Saudi Arabia MBS?
Maybe
because I noticed Kyle Kalinske said something along those lines, and putting two and two together because Obama and Trump were also buddy buddy with Saudi Arabia during all those things, drone striking Yemen, Qatar, and all these other like nations that aren't really a threat to anybody.
Yeah.
It to me, it doesn't seem that unreasonable to think that the whole drone strike in, I believe it was Yemen or Syria, I can't remember which, it happens so often.
Yeah.
To me, it's not really that unreasonable to say that it was kind of a mea culpa.
Sure. Yeah, it probably was. They, I don't really understand the United States' willingness to be all buddy buddy with Saudi Arabia. I don't. They should. They're a country that should not be our allies. That doesn't necessarily mean we should go bomb them, but
Right.
because I'm non-interventionist, and I have I have this
Likewise.
buddy who comes in where I work. He comes in and hangs out for a little bit, and we get into it because he's a big Democrat, and I always say that our Department of Defense should be used exclusively defensively.
Exactly.
Uh, and he
It's
just
in the
sort of
name.
rolls his eyes and laughs, and it pisses me off. He's an older guy, and he's the kind of people, or he's the kind of person who's just like, "Oh, you're young, you don't know what you're talking about."
Oh yeah, I've gotten that quite a bit too. Even though 30 is kind of creeping up on both of us. But
Yeah,
yeah, I mean it's. I've also usually I used to get that kind of flack more from Republicans back then, but now I get it from a mix of Republicans and Democrats nowadays about the whole drone strikes, non-interventionism. Because I've had a few friends, and I'm not going to mention any names for their sake. Um, Speaking about the whole war in Iraq and Afghanistan, I've spoken up against that. I've been very critical of that for a good number of years. Probably say since I was 13, starting to get into this thing. And the main argument that I would get is, oh, if we didn't go over there, that region would be, what's the phrase I'm looking for? It would be, I, it would be unstable. That's what I'm thinking. It would be more unstable. I'm like, and I'm sitting here. I would always counter with, well, it was kind of unstable to begin with. In all honesty, if anything, our interventions there have made it more unstable, just like our intervention with Libya back in 2012 or 13, whenever that was. I
yeah,
slept since then.
absolutely. And um, the thing is, people they cannot define victory anymore, and that's how you know it's all sort of based on bullshit. Because because when we
Hmm.
first went into Iraq and Afghanistan, they're like, oh well, we got to get Osama bin Laden, got to get bin Laden, because he did 9/11.
Hmm.
Okay, well then with the Iraq thing, it was we got to get Saddam Hussein because he has weapons of mass destruction. Well, that turned out to be a lie.
I remember that.
That turned out to be a lie, and then they moved the goalpost, and they're like, "Well, he's just a bad guy. We got to get him because he's a bad guy." Well, there are a lot of bad
Right.
guys in the world. It doesn't mean you have to overthrow the government. Um,
Hmm.
and but they keep moving the goalposts because both Saddam Hussein and Osama bin Laden have been dead for a really long time.
Yeah, I remember. I remember Saddam Hussein had been executed. I believe it was 2007, and of course there was that whole raid in Pakistan that got Bin Laden in 2011. So at that point, you kind of have to just sit there and question why are we
Well,
still
yeah,
there?
and getting rid of Saddam Hussein, what that did was that created a power vacuum, which allowed the rise of ISIS to happen. Because I mean,
Hmm.
yeah, Saddam Hussein, he was not a good guy, but he was a secularist, and he sort of kept the
Right.
religious fundamentalists at bay. But then we got rid of him, and it allowed them to rise to power, and so we were in a worse situation.
It kind of like what we're trying to do, or what may end up happening sooner than we think in Syria against Bashir
Yeah,
al-Assad, or because really they're trying to make the whole argument that he's another Saddam Hussein, and they didn't outright say it, but it's one of those things where if you know how to read between the lines, if you can put two and two together, they're trying to do the exact same thing. At, it's like the whole chemical attacks in Doma, which again WikiLeaks has kind of shown through leaking studies from I believe it was Oxford and MIT. The toxicology reports from those sites or something. I don't know the exact details, so I'm going to misquote something. But basically, they had evidence that showed that there were some studies that happened over there, and they managed to find out that the so-called chemical weapons attacks were not deployed by the Syrian government, rather by fundamentalist rebels that are being backed by either the CIA or the Pentagon. Hell, going back to Kyle Kalinske, I remember when he reported that, I believe it was over in Syria, there were two rebel factions fighting each other and killing each other. One was backed by the CIA, one was backed by the Pentagon. So that should tell you a good bit of
Right.
information right
Yeah.
there.
It's a lot of it's artificial, and even this ties back to money in politics, because they want
Mm-hmm.
endless war, because endless war makes profits to Boeing
Exactly.
and all these defense contractors. It makes a big profit, all this endless war, and so I have no doubt that a lot of it is artificial.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't doubt it myself either. Basically, and it's a really deep rooted issue, the whole money in politics thing, the military industrial complex. When going back as far as John F. Kennedy, Kennedy spoke out against this. Now, he may not have been the best president ever if he hadn't been assassinated, but I believe he could have been a better president than what we have now by a
Yeah.
long shot. Because I also think, and this is more of I guess you could say this is more of a conspiracy theory type of level, even though I wholeheartedly believe this, and I will until I'm absolutely proven wrong. But he did issue an executive order. It was 11.11.0, which was going to uh, transfer the ownership of our currency from the Federal Reserve back to the Treasury. Because if you read into the 16th Amendment that was signed in 1913 by Woodrow Wilson, basically since then, that amendment is the whole reason why the Federal Reserve exists today and why the IRS exists today. Because it transferred the ownership of our money to the Federal Reserve, which is nothing more than a private bank, a private central bank, as opposed to the Treasury.
Right.
And of course, the powers that be did not like that Kennedy was trying to get that into action. And next thing you know, 1963, he went to Dallas and came
Yeah.
back in a box.
Yeah. I think there might be something to that. I also, and this is another conspiracy theory, but I also don't think that the Vietnam War would have happened if he wasn't assassinated, because LBJ was the one who escalated that entire situation.
Yeah,
Um,
really, we had no business being in Vietnam,
and
but I'm gonna let you continue.
I also I think that it ought to be looked into that possibly the government had something to do with MLK and with his assassination, because the FBI did send him a letter trying to prompt him to kill himself.
Yeah, I remember hearing about that. I
Yeah.
never really looked into it, but that wouldn't
No.
surprise me at all.
Well, the thing that's so interesting about MLK, and I'm sort of the MLK Day Grinch. I hate that holiday every year. And if
Mm-hmm.
and
Can relate.
it's not what people think it is. Like, people say, "Oh, you hate MLK Day because you don't like black people." No, it has nothing to do with that. I hate MLK Day because the people celebrating it don't have a clue what that man was about and what he died for. Like, I mean, yes,
Mm-hmm.
he was a great uh, proponent of uh, race equality. Yes, he was a great civil rights leader. That's true. But by 1968, race relations were sort of on the way to changing, and he had fallen out of relevancy.
Mm-hmm.
And he was starting to plan a poor people's march. He shifted from racial issues to economic injustice, and that frankly pissed off a lot of the media. That pissed off the administration at the time, because, in the eyes of the administration, they're like, well, we gave him everything he wanted. Why won't he stop? And it wasn't until he switched to caring about economic injustice when he sort of fell out of the good graces in the eyes of the media and John public.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't doubt, if the U.S. government had something to do with that. I mean, even Martin Luther King Jr.'s son has stated that he doesn't believe James Earl Ray did it.
Yeah, it's kind of like, anyone who's skeptical of the whole Lee Harvey Oswald thing. I mean, I believe it's really, it's not that unreasonable to assume that the government did have something to do with it. Because I mean, why wouldn't they? That's the
Well,
simple question you have to ask: is
well,
why wouldn't they do that?
they and the media have a long history of lying, and it's not new.
Oh
It
yeah.
didn't just start with the Iraq War, because they lied about that and they did it willingly. And if you were against the war, you
Mm-hmm.
got shit canned, like Phil Donahue
Mm-hmm.
and Ed Schultz,
Yep.
which Ed Schultz was fired because he wanted to cover Bernie Sanders' campaign. But still, if you go against what the media's narrative is, what they want their narrative to be, you get fired. And I think that's enough to tell you that there's something not right about it. There's something off there.
It's just like again with Tulsi Gabbard, how she's against all these wars and everything, and now they're saying, well, they maybe aren't saying it now, but they were heavily at that point saying that she's an Assad apologist, that she's a Russian asset, and I'm sitting here thinking, okay, why in the hell would wanting to be out of illegal wars, why is bringing our troops home a Russian talking point? That
Yeah,
makes no
and
sense.
they love straw men. They love it. They love to straw man people. Like, if you don't like Kamala Harris, you're sexist and racist. Well, I like Nina Turner. She's a black woman. I'd vote for her in a
Mm-hmm.
heartbeat. But I'm not going to vote for Kamala Harris. So am I
Yep.
sexist and racist? Does that make sense? And it's because these
Um,
the media and these corporations, they will always concede over stupid bullshit that doesn't matter, culture war bullshit, before they actually address the real problems.
mm-hmm.
And that's been proven with the stupid potato head controversy and Pepe Le Pew and Dr.
Oh
Seuss.
yeah.
I mean, I personally don't have a strong opinion one way or the other about it, but it's a distraction away from Biden bombing Syria, from them blatantly not doing the
Mm-hmm.
$15 minimum wage. It's a distraction from all these horrible decisions Congress and the current administration are making, and frankly, stupid people fall into the trap.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. It's this whole culture war thing, and all these trivial bullshit is really just a distraction from what's really going on. And speaking about the $15 minimum wage thing, this isn't me saying I told you so to the progressives or anything, but I'm sitting here thinking you can't tell me that you wholeheartedly believe that Biden was going to give the whole $15 minimum wage thing. Now, you could say he might be pushed a little to the left because of people like Sanders, had that actually happened, or had there been more progressives or more, I guess, Justice Democrats, whatever you want to call them, in the House and maybe the Senate, then you could make the argument that there may have been a chance to push him a little further left. But, when you got people like Pelosi or Chuck Schumer or all these other guys in there, no one can seriously tell me that they wholeheartedly believe that Joe Biden was going to 100%
Oh
fight for the
no,
$15
and
minimum
hell,
wage.
I don't even think the Justice Democrats are going to fight for the $15 minimum wage, because they have just shown that they're unwilling to fight for anything. Uh, like
Exactly.
back in January, before Nancy Pelosi was reelected Speaker of the House, there was this whole online thing started by Jimmy Dore, and I like Jimmy Dore. Um, Force the vote,
Hmm.
hashtag force the vote. And it was basically a plea to the Justice Democrats. They only needed 6 votes. It was a plea to the Justice Democrats to withhold their votes for Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House, in order to force a vote on Medicare for all. And then you had idiots like Cenk Uygur, criticizing it. And the thing is, Cenk Uygur, I used to like him, but he has been so damn insufferable since after the 2016 primary. Because he criticized Jimmy really harshly, did like character assassination towards Jimmy Dore, and it doesn't matter whether you like Jimmy Dore or not. I thought it was a good idea, and it was an idea, good or not. Whether you want to believe that was a good idea, good or not, it was something. What the hell was Cenk Uygur's idea? He didn't have anything.
Status quo.
Yeah, but he can't
just status quo to own
because he's a faux progressive.
Conservatives.
And then fast forward to the $15 minimum wage debate, to put it, because the only way that's going to pass is through budget reconciliation. That's the only way that's going to be able to pass, right, because through budget reconciliation, you only need 51 votes, and you only have 3 chances to do that a year. Right. And they just lost one of them because it wasn't in that COVID relief package. But then Cenk Uygur came out for force the vote. It was pretty much the same situation, except there was even more leverage this time because this was a must-pass bill. And he came out with the whole force the vote thing, but he wouldn't call it force the vote. In fact, it was hilarious. He did a live stream on Facebook, and he almost called it force the vote, but he caught himself because of how heavily he criticized Jimmy Dore. And Jimmy Dore had a field day with it because what was it, like 89% or 90%, 9 out of 10 of TYT's viewers on their app thought force the vote was a good idea.
Yeah, so it's like guys like Cenk and Anna Kasparian kind of got ratioed to hell with that.
And then they still wouldn't do it, and all they do is, ask for more money, which I understand why some people don't like Jimmy Dore. Like, I get it. But 3 weeks before Cenk Uygur came out against force the vote, he was all for it, said it was a great idea. Then in those 3 weeks, he and Jimmy had a falling out, and he came out against it because he made it all about Jimmy. It wasn't about Jimmy. It never was about Jimmy. Jimmy Dore himself even said that he'd just let, if what it took to get Cenk on board was to just let Cenk call it his movement, he'd let him, because it wasn't about Jimmy Dore. It was about forcing the politicians to do what 60% of this country wants in Medicare for all.
Exactly, but as we've seen, as it became evident, I guess Cenk's position on that was more just vote for the status quo or keep the status quo to own the conservatives or something like that, which again ties into the whole bullshit culture war thing.
Because at first he was for it, but then they did that town hall and it started to really gain traction. Justin Jackson of the Los Angeles Chargers got in on it, and they were calling out AOC and stuff about it, and it started to gain some momentum, and then he came out against it, which proves that he's full of crap. He's not a progressive, or if he is a progressive, he's not a very effective one.
He's like the I guess the liberal equivalent of a rhino, kind of a pino, if you will, progressive in name only.
Yeah, and he loves it. He loves it when these conservatives are in power, because that's when he does most of his fundraising. Because he can be the firebrand then, because it's the Republican in power. But when Democrats are in power, he's like, shh, don't criticize them. we'll get it when we can win. But and it's like, yeah, well, if not now, when kind of thing. Because later
Right.
never comes.
Exactly. I mean, I've learned that the hard way. Later never comes, or tomorrow never comes. Basically, if you want something
Right.
done, you got to do it right then and there. But can't tell Cenk Uygur or anyone else
And
like
the
that
and the
that.
Justice Democrats, they've I thought it was funny because AOC criticized Jimmy Dore of violence because he called her out on Twitter. He tweeted at her, and she called that violence, and then she called out. I think she called out Trump over something, but it was after Trump was out of office. She called him out over something, and Jimmy sort of was like, "Oh my God, AOC, don't get violent now," which was hilarious.
Yeah, that kind of reminded me of when Ben Shapiro tried to debate AOC. Now, say what you want about Ben Shapiro, I can see why people don't like him. I mean, I agree with some of what he says, not absolutely everything. There's a good number of things I disagree with him on, and he does kind of come off as a smug asshole. But again, say what you want about Ben. It's just like when he tried to debate AOC and was even willing to donate, I think it was $10,000 to a charity of her choice. But what did AOC do? She refused and ended up saying that he was catcalling her.
Yeah,
I'm just
and
like, what in the hell is
Anna
that?
Kasparian, she attacked Jimmy Dore for going on Tucker Carlson show. Jimmy goes on that show all the time, and he does it because he knows Trump uh, watches Tucker Carlson, and he wanted to
Mm-hmm.
get his message to the then president. And she called him out, and she said we shouldn't even entertain the people who watch Fox News. But the thing is, not every Republican you see is too far gone. They're not all TFGs. There
Right.
are some, absolutely. Like there were just pictures of Trump that have been released. His first pictures post presidency, and he looks like shit. He looks terrible. And I'm sure there are some people out there like, man, he's such a handsome man. Okay, they're TFG. Okay, but um,
Yeah.
there are a lot of people who watch Fox News who aren't TFGs. That's like there are even some fairly apolitical people who watch that show, and they like it because Tucker Carlson is sort of a fake populist. Um, and that's like when Kyle Kalinske went on Joe Rogan. There were a lot of people in the comments who were like, "Man, I thought he was a crazy lefty, but he seems really reasonable." And it's because Kyle Kalinske, he's principled, and that's what I want to try to do as a political commentator and a maybe politician again. I want to be principled, and I don't want to move my positions based on what my party's doing. If my party is doing something wrong, I'll call them out on it. If the other party's doing something right, I'll say good job, because I don't care about party loyalty like
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people in the media do. But I think average Joes even realize they might call themselves Republican or Democrat, but I think average Joes, they sort of realize that neither party's really working for them. And that's
Right. It's like whether you're on the left or the right. I mean, this is one of those things that dawned on me a while ago. It's like whether you're a liberal or conservative, libertarian, Green Party, whatever. It's like if you think about it, we all kind of want the same thing. Our The way we differ is how we go about it. Like for example, Medicare for all. Personally, I wish every American had access to good health care. I personally don't think that government supplying it is the way to go, but that's neither here nor there,
yeah.
and that's a whole other subject.
Well, the thing is, and here's how Bernie Sanders should have answered the questions during the debate. Um, when asked about health care, because I think the mistake a lot of Democrats make progressives make is they try to take the moral high ground on that, and really that sort of comes off as insufferable a lot of the time. And I think the best way to explain it
Hmm.
is, you know, well, how are you going to? When they ask, how are you going to pay for it? Well, I could be petty and say, well, how are we going to pay for the drone strikes we just did? Nobody asked that question. Nobody asked that question. But
Exactly.
yeah,
It's easy to spend other people's
but
money.
the best way to answer that question is to say, um, well, we're going to cancel your private taxes that are disguised as premiums to large healthcare, large price gouging healthcare companies. We're going to cancel your private taxes and raise
Hmm.
your public taxes, which will net save you money.
Hmm.
I think that's the best way to answer that question. But Bernie never really did that. I'm not sure Bernie knew to do that. I don't really know who his strategists were, but and
Right.
I think that that's the approach a lot of progressives in Congress and the Senate should take. They should try to explain it in very matter of fact ways instead of getting up on the soapbox and trying to take the moral high ground, because really that just sort of seems I don't know, that puts a bad taste in people's mouths, I guess.
Yeah, no one likes someone that
Right.
just gets on there and gets on a high horse and just spouts whatever. Now, but they're willing to listen to someone that actually makes clear, concise arguments. Whether they're for
Yeah.
or against a certain thing. It's just like you said, people get on their soapbox and try to take the moral high ground, which doesn't work with everyone, especially when you got people that are more like nihilist or sociopathic, or people that just don't give a shit. But yeah, no one really likes someone that gets on a soapbox and tries to take the moral high ground. And people would just rather listen to reason rather than, oh, if you're not for this, then you're
Right.
insert
Well, and
ism here
it's viewed through a black and
or
white lens.
whatever.
Politics has always been viewed through a black and white lens. You know, there you have good people and you have bad people.
Yeah.
Well, I say that while human beings, I'd say most human beings are generally quote good people, and I want even the even the biggest MAGA son of a bitch out there to have access to good healthcare that is free at the point of service, because I just think that that's
Hmm.
what everybody deserves, and that's like I don't really understand when Texas had that terrible snowstorm a month or so ago. Um, I saw some idiot Democrats online, like sort of laughing about it. Like, this is what you get. No, we need to go help those people. I don't care if you disagree with them politically or not. And they're like, oh, now they want our funding. They deserve to have the funding. They just had a natural disaster, sort of.
Right. Imagine if Hurricane Katrina happened now, and because Louisiana is a red state, you have all these people saying, "Oh, they deserve that because they stay in the damn Delta or whatever, or they're staying in the Gulf where the water rises and everything." And the same shit they're saying about the whole Texas power grid not doing its job or failing the people. They'd say that
Yeah,
about
it's
Katrina. They'd
because,
say that about whatever. Basically, it's not even night and
yeah,
day.
and
It'd be
it's
the
not,
same shit we'd
they
be
weren't
listening to.
prepared for that. Granted, but they still deserve our funding, and it not everybody. And like, if you want to make it partisan, which I don't agree with, but if you want to make it partisan, not every person in Texas voted for Trump. Hell, towards the beginning of the election, it looked like
Exactly.
Biden might win Texas, and there were Biden voters in Texas. Uh, what's his name? The guy that ran against Ted Cruz. Beto. Beto's from Texas. I don't like
Beto.
Beto, but people voted for him.
I don't like Beto because of the whole hell yeah, we're coming for your AR-15s and your AKs because I'm a very pro gun guy.
Well,
I've
I
made
don't
that
like him
extremely
because
clear on my Facebook.
from the very beginning, there was something about him that rubbed me the wrong way. And I remember there was this hilarious magazine
Yeah,
article of a quote from him that said, "Man, I was just born to get in it." What does that mean? Like, what the hell does that mean? Like, in what? Born to get in what? Like, you gonna tell me what you're for? So that's a reason I don't like him. I don't want The Rock to run for president either. I know there are a lot of people pushing for that.
I mean,
Yeah, well,
I
the
would
thing
just for
is,
the memes, but
I
that's really
wouldn't have a
about it.
problem voting for The Rock if I knew what he stood for, but I don't, and you don't either. Nobody knows what The Rock stands for because he doesn't talk about it.
Nah, I don't really think I don't really even think he's going to run, to be honest with you. And if he does, maybe he might make his platform more clear then. But I don't. I think that's more or less in the
Well, his
back of
new
his mind,
show
or if
isn't.
it's in his mind at all. Which personally, if he doesn't run, I personally don't blame him because speaking about the whole Trump looking like shit thing is just like when like 2015 how you could see a new picture, or new at that point picture of Obama, how he got gray as hell. And I'm just sitting like,
Oh
well,
yeah,
being president probably does that to you.
yeah, and Trump's not the healthiest guy in the world, so yeah,
Oh
he
no.
looked pretty rough, but yeah,
Yeah,
I
politics
mean
does that to
just
you, I
hell,
guess.
look at Bernie. He's so crooked. The way his posture's terrible. Shoulders are slumped. But Bernie doesn't give a shit about how he looks. Trump has always been kind of
Right.
vain in that way.
Mm. Yeah, you could tell in his body language,
Yeah.
much less how he speaks. But yeah, you also did say you wanted to talk about books and other subjects. I understand you have been writing a few things. Would you care
Sure.
to talk
So
about those?
I just finished a novella, a fairly long novella. It's almost a novel, and it will probably be released in a standalone edition instead of a collection because of its length. But the novella is called Bunny Boy, and um,
Hmm.
it's an odd little story. It follows a man named David Peterson, who had just buried his 7-year-old son after a tragic accident. And I don't know
Hmm.
if you probably do remember this. I don't remember what grade we were in at the time. Maybe eighth grade, maybe freshman in high school or something. It was when the McDonald's down here was doing a grand reopening. Yeah, and that,
Oh yeah, I do remember that. I
yeah,
want to say it might have been the eighth or freshman year. It's either eighth grade or freshman
right.
year, one of them
Uh,
two. I've slept since
but I
then.
remember a little boy ran out and got hit by a dump truck, and I'll never forgot
Hmm.
the first page on the newspaper, and it was of the mother, which was probably distasteful. Um, but that photographer had impeccable timing. It was just the mother screaming in agony,
Hmm.
and that always stuck with me. And I wanted to write about it, but I didn't know at the time what it uh, what it was going to be about. I just knew that it had something to do with that. And to me, stories are kind of they're not really created things; they're found things. And I think the best metaphor I've heard to describe it
Hmm.
is it's like discovering a fossil, and you brush away a little dust or sand at a time,
Yeah.
and if you can get the whole thing out in one piece, you win. That's kind of what it's like to me. And And so I just sort of let the image sit there in my head, whatever dark corner that came from. And over time, I had another image that at the time was unrelated, and I just sort of imagined looking out of a window across this like country farmland and seeing a man in a rabbit suit, like a dirty rabbit suit matted with its fur matted with dirt and stuff. And that was a disturbing image. And I didn't. I had gone through a really bad time after the 2020 election. You know, I was very depressed. Throughout the entire year of 2020, I was very depressed. I think everybody was. And I couldn't finish projects. I would start a writing project, and I'd get a decent amount into it, but I'd get stuck and not know how to finish it. So I couldn't finish anything, and I had lost my confidence as a writer because it had been, by that point, 4 years, 3 years. It had been 3 years since the last book came out. And so I sat down and I thought about that scene with that newspaper headline, and I just started writing it down, taking place. All the names are made up. It's all fiction. But starting at the funeral of that little boy. And somewhere along the way, the image with the guy in the bunny suit, which actually isn't in the story per se, I married the two together, and what came out of it was a 40,000 word novella. It's like 115 pages in length, and it's my favorite thing I've written. But anyway, it follows this guy David Peterson right after he had buried his son, and he's sort of just left there alone. He doesn't really have a lot of friends. His wife, or his estranged lover, the estranged mother of the child, was kind of watching him when the whole thing went down, and so he partially blames her, and she's like hooked on meth and stuff, and he's like going through internal dialogue in his head, and he's like, this is probably the last time I'll ever see her, and that's okay with me. Like, just sort of cold stuff, which I don't agree with. But he's sort of just left alone at the gravesite, you know, just sort of thinking, and he's approached by this elderly man, who seems to take an odd interest in his situation, and as the story goes on, it sort of revealed why. And it's basically about David getting caught up in the madness of that old man as he plunges deeper and deeper into his own insanity. And I think it's a horror story, but I like to call it more of a tragedy. It deals with themes of religion and grief and the different ways, the very different, polar opposite ways you can deal with that emotion. So,
yeah, that sounds very interesting. I really got to check that out.
no,
have you
it'll be out
released
next
it
year.
yet? Has it been published or? Well, yeah, when that drops, I'm definitely checking it out because that sounds like something that I would actually kind of enjoy. I'd kind of be sunk into.
It's sort of like a
reading wise.
There's some notes of Pet Cemetery there. There are some notes of The Great God Pan by Arthur Machen. There are some notes of The Monkey's Paw. And it's a pretty dark and nasty piece of work. It's my favorite thing I've done. It kind of gave me my confidence back in terms of writing, and I got 2 other projects going now, but they're still in the very early stages.
Oh yeah, like I know all about that stuff because hell, because I was in a couple of
Mhm.
bands and I used to write music. I wrote both music and lyrics, but I haven't really written a full song of lyrics since 2016. And when my best friend and her goddaughter, when they passed away, that really did take a toll on me. And since then, I've never could finish writing, whether it was lyrics or a song or anything. But here lately, it's like I've had, for example, this podcast. I had it thought up last year, but I never could get around to doing it until
Right.
recently. So I know all about the whole writer's block and things happening in your personal life that affects that and puts it on hold,
Yeah.
so to speak.
Well,
But yeah, I still got to check out
I'll let you
that
know.
story
I'll
when it
send you a
publishes.
message. But
Good
the,
deal.
the thing about writer's block is I had always been very critical of it. And I was wrong to. I was wrong to be very critical of it because I just sort of chalked it up to laziness at the time. I didn't understand it. Because it hadn't happened to
Mm.
me yet. And I don't know, it's almost sort of mystical in a sense. The creative life. I think that, sometimes stories are ready to be written and sometimes they're not. And if they're not, you're not going to finish it. Um, that's like, back in eighth
Exactly.
grade, ninth grade, I was not ready to write Bunny Boy at all. I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready last year. It was something I just happened to stumble upon uh, in recent years. And I had gone through a lot of doubts of whether or not I was ever going to write anything else because I got wrapped up into politics and that can take a lot of your time. Which I had always,
Oh
sort of
yeah,
been interested in
definitely.
politics. Um, but that sort of, especially the campaign, that sort of took up a lot of my time, and that entire thing was emotionally draining. And I felt bad
Oh, I
because
bet it was.
I think one of my biggest flaws as a writer, because it's not a good thing. I think one of my biggest flaws as a writer is I hate the marketing side of it. I hate it. I feel like I'm bugging people.
Oh yeah,
Like, hey, buy my book. I feel like I'm just getting on people's nerves. And that is a challenge in
right.
writing, and it's even more of a challenge in politics in a sense because I felt like I was always just sort of bugging people, asking them to donate to this little campaign that I was running, and I went back to where I went to college, Carson Human, and met with one of my old professors. She was my favorite professor from college, and she wrote me a check, and I never cashed it. I never cashed that check just because I felt guilty. I just felt so damn guilty taking money
Ah,
from people like that. And
right. I have that same problem.
uh, that's why I kind of spoke with a friend from college about Bunny Boy and the marketing strategy behind that, and he's going to help me do that to sort of take that burden off me because it's I don't know I just feel like I'm bothering people and I don't like to bug them.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of have that same thing because I do kind of have a bit of social
Yeah,
anxiety, so that really does tie into it as well. Um, but yeah, I'm the same way. I don't like taking money from people. That's why I hardly ever ask for stuff like that. Is because it it's a whole
yeah,
personal code of honor kind of thing for me at least. About I don't like taking handouts because I see it as a handout, even though it's probably just someone helping me out. but it's still, those things conflict
Well,
a
yeah,
lot more
and
than
I know how hard
you
it
would
is
think.
to earn your money, do your job. I know how much money means, and to the idea of somebody
Hmm.
spending that on me and my bullshit kind of makes me feel bad. Um, but on
Yeah.
a different note, it's a great story. So when it comes out, anybody out there listening should totally buy it. Uh, but just that's probably all I'm going to do in terms of marketing about that because it just makes me uncomfortable.
Right. I mean, the whole marketing thing can take a toll because there's so much to it, and really it's nothing that I would ever consider myself an expert in. That's why I don't really dabble in that too much. The way I market myself, kind of like how I've been doing my whole wrestling career
Yeah.
thing, is I have my page, I share it, I share my promos, and all that good stuff, and if people see
Right.
it and they like it and they share it, they can. It's just like here lately, I've been getting a good amount of reach, but that's kind of the approach I've been taking. Is I just
Yeah,
share it and
and I mean
let it
that's
go
sort
from
of
there.
like I'm the same way in that sense. With I just want to. I don't want to spend my time marketing. There's a type of writer who loves marketing, but really, in like 9 times out of 10, that writer that loves to market, what they really wanted to do is be a marketer. So they write that one book, and then they spend the rest of their life marketing that book, and then they don't write another book. I write the book, I put it up online and tout about it a little bit, and then I go off and write the other book. I don't want to spend all my time marketing, and I just don't like it. It makes me uncomfortable. And
Yeah, it's
yeah,
just
and
it's just
and
it's
there's
just too much work if you ask
visual
me.
art is like vital in it, and I'm not a visual artist. I can't draw. I can't do Photoshop. I can't do even the most basic of things, and that's why I have to hire people to do it. I just got done talking to a cover artist who's going to design the cover for Bunny Boy today. I'm hoping to see a mock up soon.
I bet you get a pretty good concept art for that cover. I
Yeah.
mean, because there's several ways that can
I
go.
sent them a message and sort of explained what I wanted and what the story was kind of about. I gave a more in depth synopsis than what I said on here because Zoe has told me that
Right.
I tend to get caught up in my own story and then it ends up not making much sense unless you read it. And I don't want to confuse anybody, so I'm just trying to keep it
Right.
as simplistic as possible.
Right. That's kind of my approach to a lot of things. Is
Yeah,
just
because
keep it
Bunny
short and
Boy is a
sweet to the point.
complicated story with a lot. There are a lot of moving parts in it. There is a pretty big supernatural element in it, but I'm not going to say what it is. Um,
Mm.
and you know what? Right. And
Right.
another
Don't
way
want to give away too
that
much.
another thing that really influenced that story is um, BoJack Horseman. I love that show. It is probably my
Right.
favorite show. And there is one in particular episode that just it blew me away, and it heavily influenced Bunny Boy. And that episode is called "The View from Halfway Down," which is the second to last. I don't know if you've seen BoJack
Huh.
Horseman or not.
I've never watched it, to be honest with you, but I've had people say, "Oh, you should definitely give it a try." But I'm behind on so many shows. Like I'm behind on Vikings. There's some anime that I've not been caught up on. There was The Walking
Oh
Dead, but
yeah,
I've pretty much given up on that. Uh, but yeah,
I stopped
I'm
watching The
behind on
Walking
so
Dead. I
many things.
finished
Just
Game of
ain't even funny.
Thrones.
Yeah, I did finish that. My dad and I actually kind of binge watched that the entirety of last year. or actually, no, not last year. It was 2019, or
Yeah,
up to whenever it actually finished. Like it was one of those things. I didn't think he was going to like it at first, but then
yeah. I thought
turns
that
out
show was
both of us
really
got
good.
hooked on it,
I thought that show was
and
really
it
good. This,
snowballed
in my
from
opinion,
there.
they sort of botched the ending.
Yeah, you can tell from season 7, like either early on or the middle of it, that they kind of rushed it because there was really enough content in the book series to go for like 12 seasons at minimum. And George R. R. Martin even said that, but for some reason, the directors or whomever they are, um, just decided, okay, we're not doing that. We're just
They
going to
were in a
rush
rush.
it. And Game of Thrones, yeah, Game of Thrones ended up
Yeah,
ending on a botched note when it could have ended a
yeah.
lot
Well,
better.
and especially season 7, because in the earlier seasons, it would take a character an entire season to show up at their point of destination. Where if they were like traveling or something, it'd take them the whole season just to
Right.
get there, and it took what Jon Snow one episode in season 7 to end up at the Dragonstone Castle. Is that what it was called?
Oh yeah, that was yeah,
Yeah,
I
it
can't
took
remember
like
what it's
one
called,
episode.
but I know what you're talking about.
So, and the only show recently, other than BoJack Horseman, that I actually finished, uh, which I mean it's not over yet. The third season hasn't come out yet. Is the Orville? I love the Orville. It used to come on Fox.
Mm.
Now it's going to be on Hulu. It's sort of like The Office meets Star Trek.
Yeah, my dad's been watching the hell out of that. Um, I I've seen like maybe 1 or 2 episodes. It didn't really interest me like that, but yeah, my dad's been binge watching that, or he did whenever it was. I guess
Yeah,
before it took the hiatus to go
yeah.
on
Well,
Hulu.
that's an example of a show that got better as it went on because those first few episodes
Yeah,
they're like they have stupid Family Guy humor in it because it's Seth MacFarlane. So it's stupid Family Guy humor, but
yeah, it's
as the
bound to
show
happen.
goes on, it gets a lot more serious. Kind of like BoJack Horseman. BoJack Horseman was the same way. In season 1, it was stupid uh, Family Guy humor, had a lot of cutaway gags and stuff. And by the end of the show, it ended with season 6. I think it was the most. It is the best show about mental illness I've ever seen. It just portrays it so damn well. Uh, Way better than 13 Reasons Why.
Oh yeah, because I remember when 13 Reasons Why was out, and that whole shit show that happened from that, like the whole online
Yeah,
backlash that series got, and it did kind of remind me of Ricky Gervais's joke about that in the Golden Globes, which I don't know anyone that hasn't seen his monologue at the Golden
right.
Globes that year, but it was hilarious. But I have heard that BoJack Horseman did portray like depression and all that stuff in a very great way. I've heard that from a good number of people, but I just ain't watched it. But yeah, I guess when I
Right.
catch up on some
Well,
other
you
things,
should.
I
It's a
might
good
give
show.
it a shot. So.
So, I got. I have some questions for you. I'm not sure you. I'm not sure you're comfortable with answering
Okay.
them. They're about your wrestling thing.
I'll be happy to answer those. I mean, what I had in mind as far as talking about wrestling on here is I'm gonna answer some questions, but I'm not gonna totally expose the business because there is a whole thing behind. There's a whole rabbit hole when it comes to the backstage part of it. But yeah, I'll answer. I'll
Oh
try to answer
well,
whatever
my
questions you
questions
have as far
dealt
as
with more
wrestling.
of like the business side of it because I've always been intrigued with like the business side. But okay, uh, I'll ask you this then.
Right.
What do you think has a better product right now, WWE or AEW?
Um, AEW by far, though. If you really want my complete opinion, I
Oh,
think
really?
New Japan Pro Wrestling has the best product. Yeah, you got guys like Kazuchika Okada, Tetsuya Naito there. A lot of good work. I don't know if you ever watched AJ Styles and Shinsuke Nakamura's match there. I believe it was Wrestle Kingdom. It was one of the Wrestle Kingdoms. I can't remember which one it was, but that was one of the best matches I've ever watched. Was AJ and Shinsuke Nakamura,
Really? Is it on
and it
YouTube?
makes their WrestleMania match look like nothing. Yeah, I think there's a clip where there's like a video on it that shows the highlights of it. You might be able to find the full match. If you are able to find the full match, I'd recommend watching it because AJ is one of if not he's definitely one of the best wrestlers of today. And of course Shinsuke
Yeah.
Nakamura, he's really good
Um.
himself.
So, do you listen to any wrestling podcasts? Like, I listen to clips, not the whole thing, but I'll listen to clips every now and then of Jim Cornette. I love Jim Cornette.
Oh yeah, I love Jim Cornette. I also do listen to Jericho's podcast here and there, but I mostly listen to Cornette. I also watch the Hannibal TV on YouTube. Basically, it's this guy named
Mm.
Hannibal that runs Great North Wrestling up in Canada. He's had AJ Styles wrestling up there. I think they wrestled for the IWGP title. He's had guys like Psycho Sid, Al Snow, who I've started listening to a lot more of as far as like the actual business, or like maybe not the actual business marketing side of it, but like the whole ring psychology and in ring work. Um, I mean, I don't suppose that your previous question would totally like expose the business. Well, I guess it doesn't really matter nowadays because social media is a thing and kayfabe. It's not like the Smoky Mountain days, the territory days. So, yeah, if you want to ask that previous
Oh, okay.
question, you
Well,
can, and I'll answer it to the best of my ability.
so you work with the indie circuit, right?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
work with
and
a
they,
couple of
they
indie
all
shows
they
here
all
in
have
East
different
Tennessee.
bookers.
Oh yeah, they pretty much they all pretty much have different bookers. There might be some promotions like one of them I work for, New Pro Wrestling South. Them and APW might do some things together here and there because one of the guy that runs, or I guess maybe not runs it, but one of the key guys in New Pro Wrestling South is someone I worked with in
Oh
APW
yeah.
back in
Okay,
back in
and like,
2019.
uh, I'll ask you this: the creativity when it comes into crafting those matches, uh, how does that work? Is it I guess I'm kind of asking, how's the communication there with the guy you're working with? If I can ask that.
Right. As far as like working in the ring, that really depends on who you're working with. It depends on how they work. Because I like to, I try to work like the old Memphis way, basically, or maybe not exactly the old Memphis way like Jerry Lawler, but basically what I like to do is I might call a couple spots like the Heat, where basically the baby face is looking like they're going to come back on the heel, but the heel cuts them off, and you know I uh, might work out the heat, the shine, and the finish. That's really about it as far as spots. I don't really like to call spots that much. Everything else, I just like we just make up as we go along. We walk and talk, which is how a lot of the old school guys worked back then. And there are some that still work that way today. You just don't see it as much in
Right.
WWE from what I've noticed of it. Everything looks so choreographed nowadays, where it's like guys like, and this isn't taken away from guys like Seth Rollins or anyone else. I mean, I don't mind watching matches that are like that have like a bunch of flips, that have like some that have more choreographed spots. I don't mind watching that because there are plenty of good matches with two people that work that same style. But there's just so many wrestlers in WWE that work that same style that the whole card gets oversaturated with it. And I know I'm probably, spurging out about this, which is kind of the point. But yeah, the short answer is it really depends on who is working who and how they work. You got some people that are veterans of the business that have wrestled 10, 20, however many years, and you also got guys like me that have only been working about 2 years at this point.
Oh, okay.
So it really depends on who's in the ring.
Did you ever play any wrestling video games?
Yeah, I actually have a PlayStation 2 hooked
Is that
up.
one
I've been
your
playing
favorite?
the first SmackDown versus Raw game lately.
I think the most underrated
It's
one
one
is
of my
Shut Your Mouth.
favorites. That was a good one. I mean, it's one of the first ones that I
I just
played.
like
And
how you can
it's
kind of
very
just explore
underrated.
the entire arena, and I like the draft
Yeah.
aspect too. I like how because the season starts with the draft.
Yeah, because really, at that point when the game came out, it was like 2002. That's when the whole brand
Yeah,
split thing
and
started.
Here Comes the
I
Pain.
remember
I
that
always
like
thought
it
was
was
a good one.
yesterday. Everyone says that or WWF No Mercy would be the best ones. Personally, I'm kind of biased towards Here Comes the Pain because I grew up with that generation of gaming as far as the WWF games. But I played No Mercy and it's pretty good too. But I'd have to give that to Here Comes the Pain simply because the gameplay is very fast paced. It's a very smooth gameplay, even for PS2 standards. Hell, it still holds up today. If you ask me, it plays a lot better than the 2K games. That's for sure.
I liked Here Comes the Pain. I like the season mode in that, and I think it's that game.
Yeah.
I would always play Triple H. Triple H was always my favorite, and I would always go after the big gold belt. I like that design. That's probably my favorite designed championship.
Oh yeah. I'd say that's my favorite wrestling belt. It's I think if I had to make a top three, it'd be the big gold, the ECW World Championship, like the one Rob Van Dam got after One Night Stand 2006, and probably the WWF Championship, the Attitude Era belt, not the Winged Eagle, but the one
today's
after
WWE
that.
belts kind of ugly. They're so uniform.
I mean, basically, like the WWE Championship, the Universal Championship, and the women's belts, they're really just recolors of the same design, which makes me really miss like the Ruthless Aggression or Attitude Era when you had different belts and different designs and you knew what they were just from looking
at them. The one
at them.
before the Divas Championship.
Yeah, that's and my favorite women's belt too.
The cruiserweight title. I don't like the new cruiserweight title.
Like the one that I would like the cruiserweight title if it was on a black strap. I don't know. I don't know if it is, or I think it is now. But I
haven't watched in a while.
It shows how I've not even watched WWE in a good minute. Yeah. Basically, when you're like me, when you've worked in the business for a while, you kind of stop watching the TV stuff as much. Mainly, if I do watch WWE, it's going to be some from like our era, like Ruthless Aggression or Attitude, or even some like old matches, like for example, Randy Savage and Ricky Steamboat from WrestleMania 3, so do you which is another classic.
Do you have an opinion on the what do you call it? The cinema style, the theatrical style matches that they did at like WrestleMania last year with The Undertaker?
Yeah, I mean, I do have an opinion on it. It's like I don't dislike the matches at all. I think some of them are actually pretty good, like the Boneyard match between Taker and AJ Styles. There was also the ultimate deletion between Matt Hardy and Bray Wyatt. That was a great one. I don't care what anyone says. I will watch that over and over again because it was just great. Um, and speaking about Matt Hardy, I guess you could say WWE kind of got those from Impact Wrestling when Matt and Jeff were still with them, because you had that deletion match between Matt and Jeff, and that I guess that kind of snowballed this whole thing. You also had Matt and Hurricane Helms against the Young Bucks when they did that whole match. And one thing that I will always laugh at is the jab they took at Triple H,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
you've seen the memes about Triple H burying people and everything. Um, it was like Matt and Hurricane were like they just finished like physically putting dirt back in a hole, and you had Matt Hardy saying even the man with three H's would be proud of how he buried this young and prosperous talent, and it was
yeah.
just it was a quick jab, but it was still hilarious. But uh, overall, I do kind of like the cinematic matches.
I
They're
think the
they're not my
best.
favorite, but I do like them.
I think the best designed gimmick right now is the Fiend. Uh,
Yeah, I love the Fiend. I love the Fiend gimmick. I just hate the
WWE
way
never
WWE. I just
WWE
hate
has
the way they
never really
booked it.
been good
It makes me think Vince
at
Russo's still there.
booking the creepier side of the gimmicks. You know, like they've never been that great at that. Like they botched the Boogeyman.
Yeah,
Um,
they botched the Ministry of Darkness, which
yeah,
was
and they
my
screwed
favorite
up.
stable of the Attitude Era.
I don't know. They've never been good at the sci-fi horror gimmicks. My favorite thing about the Fiend is that mask, because that mask was designed by Tom Savini, who did. Yeah, he that mask
Huh.
was
I actually did
designed
not
by
know that.
him, and I'm a huge Tom Savini fan. You know, I love Creep Show, and um, you know, I've always been a big Stephen King fan as well. Um,
Yeah. See, that bit of information I actually did not know, but I do like the Fiend's mask
yeah,
because it's really well made.
yeah, I think it looks pretty cool.
And it really pissed me off again about the whole booking thing, about how they fed him to Goldberg, and it's just like I never will understand from a creative aspect why you
Wow.
would have someone like Goldberg who can't even do his own moves now, and you would think that match with him and the Undertaker in Saudi Arabia would tell you, hey, that's not a good idea, because even Undertaker was pissed off of that match, reasonably so, because he got dropped on his
Was that
head
the
when Goldberg tried to do the jackhammer.
Crown Jewel pay per view?
But yeah, that was, well, I don't know if it was Crown Jewel or
Those shows,
yeah,
by and
it had
large,
to have
have been
been. It was
pretty
one of the
bad.
Saudi Arabia shows.
Uh, but-
Yeah,
and
I
the
mean,
thing,
yeah, that's kind of universally accepted. Though I will say the whole Titus O'Neil thing where he
yeah,
slipped under the ring,
the thing that
that was
pissed me
probably the
off
best thing to
the
come from
most
that.
about those Saudi Arabia matches, well, one match in particular, the one Shawn Michaels came out of retirement for, like that was terrible. Like I've
Oh
always liked
God,
Shawn
yeah,
Michaels.
that's
I understand that he was infamously hard to work with. I understand that.
oh yeah, he really was. Jim Cornette could write a book, or actually could write a whole series on why Shawn Michaels was
And
hard to work with then. But
well,
yeah, I agree.
Triple
I
H got
hated that
hurt
match.
in that match pretty early
I couldn't
on.
even finish it.
That was my main reason for watching, and then he did terribly in that
Yep.
match.
Yeah, like he
Yeah, and
he
you
tore
know,
his pectoral muscle, I
it
believe.
was sort of hard to believe. I always watch. I'll always dip back in when Triple H shows up because again, he's my favorite, and old habits die hard, you know. And so I'll
Yeah,
always
right. See, I've liked Triple H myself.
Yeah,
He's
and
not one
I'll
of my
always
favorites, but
sort of
I do for
dip
the most
back
part
in
like Triple
when
H.
he shows up, and it was sort of hard for me to believe he did not wrestle one match in 2020, and he's not going to do one this year. I don't think he'll be at Mania
Oh
this
shit!
year. And his match with
Nah,
Batista was
I
sort
don't
of
think he will either.
mediocre. For the build, especially the build up to that. There was
Yeah,
hardly any build
it
to
was what
that
it
match.
was. Yeah, there really was little build up to him and Batista's match. Which even if there was build up, I mean, it's a Triple H Batista match, so it's not going to be. Dave Meltzer's not going to rate it five
Yeah,
stars, which Dave Meltzer, that's a whole other can of worms. Because there are plenty of times because everyone seems to, well, not everyone, but a lot of fans and or marks, as we say, like take they take Dave Meltzer's word for a lot of stuff as far as like how good a match is when because and whenever someone does bring that up, I would always point them to my favorite match of all time, which was
yeah,
The Rock versus Hollywood Hogan at WrestleMania 18. Dave Meltzer gave that a 3 stars, and to this day, I still can't understand why people. I get backlash from people saying, "Oh, well, the in ring work wasn't that
yeah,
good." I'm sitting here thinking, why? Because it doesn't have 100 flips. Look at them. It's The Rock and Hulk Hogan. They don't need to do a bunch of flips. They can do the absolute bare minimum, and it showed.
yeah.
They did the absolute bare minimum, and the crowd ate it up. That's how you know who a good worker is. They can
Yeah,
drag
there
out
was
a
just a
match. They can
lot
do
of
very little, and the crowd
that match was
eats it
very
up.
atmospheric. Um, you know, just there was like a tension there, and when that match was over, you could tell that something special happened. Yeah, and they tried to replicate that with The
It
Rock
was a
versus
passing of
Cena,
the
but
torch. Yeah, I mean, they couldn't catch. The only way they could have caught lightning in a bottle like that is if it was The Rock and CM Punk, which should have happened, or maybe if it was a rather if it was a if they had The Rock drop the title to CM Punk before the Mania thing,
yeah,
where Punk and Cena would have went at that
yeah.
WrestleMania.
Do you think Punk
That
will
would have
ever
been
come
something
back?
special. If he does, it won't be to WWE. I've heard people say, "Oh, he's going to go to AEW." I'm like, him and AJ Lee both kind of turned down AEW. I think if Punk does come back, it's definitely going to be a part time thing because I don't really see him coming back to full capacity because he's made his money. He's done. He's proven that he can grab the so-called brass rings and everything. He even sold more merch than John Cena at one point, so that tells you everything you need to know. Um, he's pretty much proven that there's nothing else for him to prove. So if he does come back, it'll be part time, and I think it'll either be to a Ring of Honor, Impact, or possibly New Japan. But I just don't think
Well,
he'll come
I
back to
sort of think
WWE. Is
that
all, and I don't blame him if you don't.
with Punk, I don't like the way his feud with Triple H was booked, and I'm a Triple H fan. And I'm a Triple H fan. Triple H should have put him over at Night of
Nah,
Champions,
nobody liked that.
and then they should have won the tag team match at Vengeance against
Yeah,
Punk and Truth, or not Punk and Truth, the Miz and Truth.
right. Yeah, I've listened to a lot of CM Punk shoot interviews lately, especially about how he was working with Ryback and how Ryback really botched the gorilla press onto a table where he actually missed. How the table broke is beyond me, but that whole botch and I've seen that happen. It's a shame that Punk didn't get permanently messed up from that. But yeah, I still don't think if
And
Punk does come back to wrestling, it's not going to be full time. and I personally don't blame him because, he, aside from proving that there's nothing else to prove, he's had his good matches from his debut in ECW against Justin Credible. I don't know why I said Gabriel, but against Justin Credible up until his feud with Jeff
Right.
Hardy, which was great, and there just be nothing else for him to do except maybe win a
Right.
title and put over someone else. Now, if we would have gotten CM Punk and Daniel Bryan, that would have been a good match right there. That could have been
Yeah. Now,
a WrestleMania match right there.
do you think that a lot of WWE's problems right now are because of Vince McMahon?
A lot of them, yeah, they kind of are. But at the same time, a lot of the issues that WWE has now are kind of more deeply rooted and have gone back to after the whole Chris Benoit thing happened. Because back then, before that whole thing, Raw was more like TV 14. SmackDown was technically PG, but it's not like it is now. Especially when you had Paul Heyman running SmackDown, which was awesome because at that point,
I like Paul Heyman.
SmackDown was just completely beating Raw in the ratings, and for good reason. But a lot of the problems that WWE has now are more deeply rooted than just some of the booking decisions that they've made recently. And you also got to realize that Vince's wife,
Why?
Linda McMahon, she ran for Senate once, and so, well, yeah, twice actually. Thank you for that. And ever since her first run, they really had to saturate the product because at that point they could have been like, oh well, her husband runs this type of show. What's that going to mean
Yeah.
for this? Which is kind of bullshit, but it is what it is. But a lot of the problems that WWE has are
They
just
could go
that
back if
deeply
they wanted
rooted,
to.
and
I'm not sure
possibly go back
Linda
even
will run
further than
again.
that.
Um,
I don't know if she will either.
well,
I haven't
did
really
you
paid attention to Linda's campaigns.
did you catch any of the XFL stuff, the relaunch with the XFL?
Yes, I was closely following that, and I was of course I was a New York Guardians fan, and I
Right.
really
I
wished
like the I like
that
the
they could have at
Battle
least
Hawks,
finished the season.
and I think
Yeah, they're a good
yeah,
team,
and I
but they,
think
they were they were doing really good during that relaunch.
I think they were doing a lot of things right that they got wrong with the first one because part of the problem with the first XFL was they treated it like another brand of the WWE. Because the first ever game, The Rock introduced the
Yeah,
game, and they had Jesse Ventura, uh, which I like Jesse Ventura. He might run for president in 2024. Uh, yeah, I'll vote for him too if he runs. I think he's going to do it Green Party though.
I'd vote for him.
Uh, yeah, but he was an announcer. I think even
Yeah, I like
uh,
Jesse Ventura.
Jerry King Lawler announced some games, and it was just yeah, or like
It was too gimmicky, is what it was.
the whole they encouraged their players to date the cheerleaders to sort of start stuff, and yeah, that was what was wrong
Yeah,
with the original XFL, and I think they did. I think they corrected a lot of that with the relaunch. And I just sort of wonder why Vince
hmm
sold it.
I think it was because it was because of the whole pandemic thing. Because at that point you couldn't predict what was going to go where. I do believe that The Rock owns it now, and once that's able to be relaunched, there could be a possibility of
Well,
him
we're in
transferring the
talks to
ownership
merge
back.
with
But
the
who
Canadian
really knows
Football
at
League.
this point? Um,
That's been on Facebook the last week or so.
see, I didn't know that. I've never even heard that.
What I heard was they're
it must have slipped.
postponing the
Must have been
2022
under the
season
radar
because
for
they were
me.
going to go
but
back and relaunch it in 2022. And I think they're going to postpone it and see if they can combine with the Canadian Football League. But the Canadian Football League fans want them to adopt their rules. So that's a very controversial, touchy subject with XFL fans. Because a lot of people, I saw a lot of complaints that the CFL was too much like the old Arena Football League. Which I don't think that that's really true, but I liked Arena Football. I liked it a lot. It was different, It wasn't the status quo,
Right. I mean, it spices things up. Right. Speaking of arena football, I don't know if you heard of it, but I've been watching it lately. Have you heard of the Fan Control Football League? Well, it's a kind of a newer thing. They mainly broadcast on Twitch, but I get the footage from Highlight Heaven on YouTube. But basically, the whole thing about it is like the fans of whichever team, they pick the plays and stuff like that. And so far, it's actually looked pretty good. So if you like arena football, you might check that out. I mean, you go on Highlight Heaven; they got all the highlights from all the games so far. And you got guys that were in college that didn't make it to the NFL. You might have some like AAF guys, which speaking about the AAF, that was another league I was interested in, and I was yeah, like basically that was the one where it really just launched right after Super Bowl 53, I believe, and there was really no marketing, there was no build up, like there was no nothing. But even then, there was still some pretty good football. They changed a few things around, like there was no kickoffs, like they weren't like any extra points. Like anytime you scored a touchdown, you go for a 2-point conversion, which is what the FCS does, Fan Control Football League does now. And I was also thinking I would absolutely love it if like the AAF teams could merge, like if the XFL could get those teams and kind of have them as expansion teams,
right?
Because that's more content in the long run.
Yeah, me too. The gameplay was pretty good.
The XFL to relaunch,
a lot better than the old XFL. Yeah, because that league had a lot of problems.
It's like we said, it was just there was too many gimmicks as far as the first launch of the XFL. If you ask me as to why the XFL came to an end abruptly, was because I think they were at the right they're at the right place, but they were just at the wrong time because of this whole pandemic thing. If that wasn't a thing, then we could be in the middle of another season right now.
Well, do you think that they'll take on the franchising model?
It's always a possibility. I'm gonna pull a Joe Rogan and be like, it's entirely possible. So, what other subjects did you have in mind to talk about today? Or
I don't know. We can talk about pretty much anything. We can talk about my favorite authors. We can talk about my favorite authors, but I feel like that's boring.
Yeah, I mean, the sky's the limit. I mean, I kind of planned this whole this podcast to reach a broad demographic. That way, everyone has a reason to listen to it. So if you want to go into favorite authors, my only thing
Okay.
is I
Well,
may
we can
not
talk about
have as
music.
much to contribute in that subject, but I'll still talk about it. Oh yeah, we could definitely talk about that. I don't know if you heard of this band. It's like they do like folkish music, but they have but it's combined with
Yeah, the Who.
metal. They're
Yeah,
from
I have.
Mongolia. It's called the Who. I don't know
Well,
if you
my
heard of them, but
favorite
they're pretty
band,
good.
and don't make fun of me because I know that a lot of people hate this band. Well, yeah, I like Bon Jovi too, but they're not my favorite.
Bon Jovi.
They're my second favorite, I guess. Bon Jovi's my old reliable.
Uh,
I could just go back to them and feel better. But yeah, don't make fun of me for that either. Yeah,
right.
don't make fun of me for that either, because I know a lot of people hate Bon Jovi.
That's me with like Pantera.
Black Veil Brides.
Nah.
I love Black Veil Brides.
Nah. Now, if this were a few years ago, I probably would be laughing at you, but I've been revisiting them, and personally, the music part of it, like the guitars and drums and everything, is actually pretty
Yeah,
tight. Like especially the older albums, like "We Stitch These Wounds" and the other albums before Fallen Angels. Even though that was a good one too, but I feel like that single from that
yeah,
kind of overshadows the other good work on that too. I'm just not a huge fan of Andy Black's vocal style, but other than that, the
yeah.
actual music
I
part
mean,
of it, the
they sort of
instrumental
shred.
part, is actually
The
pretty good.
guitarists do. Yeah,
They kind of do. Yeah, if you
yeah,
listen to
yeah. That's a good song. I
"Perfect
like their new
Weapon,"
song that came out
that's a good example right
uh,
there.
back in November. It's called Scarlet Cross. They're doing another. They're doing another concept album.
Uh, right. I haven't really followed them since 2013 or so. I mean, I've been more or less with occasionally bands like the Who,
Yeah.
and I'm more or less been
Uh,
on like a death metal or black metal binge.
my brother's a big Hellstorm fan. I like Hellstorm a lot. Um,
I like Hailstorm.
let's see. I like and here's another band that gets a lot of hate. But I like some of their stuff. I like to listen to it when I'm feeling trashy. It is Nickelback. That's like my trashy. That's my trashy
Is it
beer
Nickelback?
stocking music. When I'm stocking beer at work,
Okay, now,
listen to Nickelback. It makes me feel nice and trashy.
yeah, I will admit that
No,
they have a few songs that aren't really bad. I
well,
mean, I just like the memes more or less, but they're not really my favorite. There are bands out there, and I'm probably going to catch some flack for this, whether it be ironic or unironic. But
yeah.
there are plenty of bands out there
Well,
worse than
Nickelback. It's
Nickelback.
not that they're not talented.
Believe me, I've listened to them.
They're fairly talented dudes. It's just they do sometimes sort of sometimes pander to the lowest
It's more or less because Mick
common
Jagger.
denominator. I like Stone Sour, but I think they're pretty much
Common
done at the moment.
denominator. Yeah,
Yeah, I like it. I like that new solo single he came out with. I
I like
forgot
just
the
about
title,
anything Corey Taylor does.
but he's doing a solo. Yeah, he's doing, and I do like some
I
Slipknot.
may not have heard it, but I'm sure it's good.
Uh,
I love Slipknot. Like that's one of the few
yeah,
metal bands my brother listens to, and he listens
like
more to
Slipknot,
rap and everything,
and
but he loves Slipknot.
oh, we can talk about movies. So, last night I watched Leprechaun. Uh, because it was St. Patrick's Day. I was gonna watch all 8 of them.
Fitting.
But yeah, I got them on like this box set thing.
There's 8. Holy
I was
crap! I
gonna
didn't know
watch
that.
all 8 of them, but I was kind of brain dead after the first one,
Oh,
and I don't. I mean, I was talking to
Yeah,
my brother,
that'll happen.
and he was kind of jealous because he was at work when I was going through this first movie, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I love that movie. That's a good movie." And I said, "Well, it's not a good movie. It's a very entertaining movie." Uh,
Yeah. It's like it's maybe not the best written, but
yeah,
it's good in the entertaining aspect to warrant it being, I guess, good in a way.
I think it's dumb
I mean, I
fun.
was never the biggest fan
It's
of
dumb
those
fun,
movies, but I can see why people like
like
them.
a Sleepwalkers. Do you remember that movie Sleepwalkers that came out in '92? I got I got that thing on
Oh
a
yeah,
collector's edition Blu-ray because I just think it is hilarious. And I'm a big Stephen King fan, and we will always have to remember because Stephen King wrote this movie that the
right.
highest and one of the most respected authors in American literature
Yeah,
today was once paid a lot of money to say "cop kebab" when he stabbed the cop through the ear with the pencil. Just that movie is so batshit insane, and it's awesome. It's like I watch a lot of Chris Stuckman on YouTube, and he reviews movies and stuff. And one of my favorite things to watch from him is like Hilariosities,
right.
where he just reviews so bad they're good movies, like
Oh yeah. I thought about doing that myself back a few years back
well,
because
he just does like these so
actually
bad
I'll
they're
just
good
go ahead and
movies.
let
Like
you finish, and I'll say my piece after.
he did The Happening, which was that I don't remember what year that movie came out, but it was an M. Night Shyamalan movie, and it was just sort of it starred Mark Wahlberg, and it was just so ridiculous. Like it was kind of built as like a serious thriller, but you don't really know if it's supposed to be a comedy or a serious thriller. Um, yeah.
Right.
Um, and
Or maybe
Nicolas
it's a comedic
Cage's The
thriller.
Wicker Man, he did that one, and The Room. And
Oh yeah.
I think one of the funniest reactions is from that movie. I think it's from The Troll or Troll, where that guy's just like, "Oh my god!" I just think that,
I
yeah, yeah,
I think I've seen
Leprechaun
that
falls
one.
into that kind of category,
I don't know if I have or not, but I think I have.
especially yeah, especially the later ones.
Right. Just the
Like In
dumb fun
Space,
from the
Leprechaun
movie.
4 is called In Space, and, and there's this scene where the leprechaun throws
Oh yeah.
a fucking pizza pan at this guy's face. And when the pizza pan falls away, his entire head has been flattened like a pizza. Like it's just so stupid, but awesome. It's awesomely stupid.
Yeah, back when I was saying, I think this would have been back in 2014. My brother and I, we were watching this one movie. It's one of those things where it's not going to be the best thing ever. Like it's not going to be too good, but at least from the title or and in another case the cover art that I was able to find of it. There was this movie. I think it was one of those sci-fi originals, or it was produced on that same kind of budget. It was called Dino Wolf, and basically I had just recorded it just for the pure sake of it. And the cover looked like some Windows 98 CGI stuff, so I'm just like, okay, it might be some good dumb fun. It was dumb fun, all right, but I don't think it was really that good because I mean it was good if you're one of those people that love to dissect movies, um, but there were quite a few scenes where it's so ridiculous. It was so hilarious. Okay, so from what I've described of it, you would think that the werewolf creature would be like some sort of like Windows 98 CGI mess, but that's not the case. It was legit. I swear on my aunt's grave, it was. just some guy in a Halloween Express werewolf costume. And I know this because you can even see the safety pin that wasn't even connecting the head to the torso. It was just a guy in a Halloween costume running around killing people and everything. And like where the werewolf would supposedly maul them, it looked like someone took like a bucket of Kool-Aid and just splashed it around. And oh, and you could also at some, if you pause it on the right
Was it one
frame, you can see the tag on the costume on the back.
movie?
There was also
Was it one of those
there
asylum
was also
movies?
what was that?
They're the people that made Sharknado.
It may have been. I can't remember. I haven't seen it in a few years, but it wouldn't surprise me if the guys that made that ended up working for Asylum. It would not surprise me at this point. At this point, nothing surprises me anymore. Well, except for a handful of things. But and just back in 2017, we watched a few other movies. There was this one. It was called Zombievers. It's kind of like a Sharknado thing, where basically there's just zombie beavers, and at one point, the zombie beavers somehow managed to
Yeah,
infect a
now I
bear,
remember
and even the bear
Zombievers.
started
That was
growing buck
Asylum.
teeth and a tail and everything.
That definitely was Asylum.
Yeah, and there was another movie. This was like I guess it was like a British dumb fun thriller movie. It's called Stitches. It's about this clown or this guy that works birthday parties as a clown or something like that. He ends up dying at this one party, and through some ritual, I guess, like a bunch of teenagers were just messing around with like some kind of Necronomicon sort of thing, and they somehow resurrect him. There were a good bit of funny parts. One of them I uploaded to Snapchat a few years back. I mean, I still have it on my stories or my archive. It's where he's chasing after one of the protagonists, I guess. And he has like this little tiny tricycle where he's in there, he's trying to pedal it, and he even just like lets it ride and everything. And I looped that and put cruising down the street in my 6'4" on it. And the best part of it, my brother and I, neither one of us were expecting it. It was arguably the best part of the film. He kills this teenage girl, says some kind of one liner. I forgot what he said. But the best part, he does a pelvic thrust, and the inflatable balloon comes out from the fly, and it even makes a sound effect. My brother and I were like, we absolutely died laughing at that, and we even looped it. It was just
Right.
that funny.
Well, like I said
I could
earlier,
go on and on about
I watch
other films like that.
I watch a lot of Chris Stuckman, or I used to watch a lot more than I do now. And so I always like to, watch his movie reviews and stuff. And I even started dabbling in movie reviews, written movie reviews, back when I was in college. Except I didn't go to the theater all that much. So I'd go to Walmart when these movies
Right.
released, and I'd buy these DVDs. And I just got tired of buying really shitty movies. Like I have The Gallows on DVD. I'm never going to watch that piece of shit again. Oh, it's a found footage.
Would you care to elaborate?
And they tried to make it sort of like found footage meets slasher genre. And it was about this.
Oh yeah,
the guy. His name
I
was
could tell
Charlie.
where this was going.
And he was working on a production of this play, and something went wrong, and he ended up getting hanged. And at the end of the play, it was supposed to be fake, but it wasn't, and so he died. And so now you got this really obnoxious Stifler-esque main character holding a damn video camera, and they're getting ready to put on this show again, and they go to the school at night for some reason. I don't like found footage films where there isn't a reason for a camera to be on. I don't know why jackass Stifler guy, Chad Stifler. I'm just going to call him Chad Stifler.
Right.
Totally a Chad. Sorry, Chad. Um, and he was like just going around being a complete dick to everybody. And apparently, Charlie Guy's ghost came back for revenge, and it was just stupid. And they even did a
Because
sequel 2
reasons.
years ago. And I even,
Oh
yeah, and
wow.
I was
Yeah,
sort of jealous because I wanted to write a
usually
sequel,
the dumbest
but I
fucking
wanted to
things have a sequel or
intentionally
two.
make it terrible. I wanted it to be like Sleepwalkers, and just be so fucking funny that you can't take it seriously because they were trying so hard to be serious. I'm not a big found footage fan. Uh,
There are actually a couple of a good found
no, I
footage
haven't seen it.
movies. One that I absolutely love. It's called Grave Encounters. I don't know if you've ever
No,
seen it, but I would definitely
no, I
check
haven't
that
seen
out.
that one.
It's
I
from
have
Dark
now. There
Sky
is one
Films,
that I
I
like.
think it is, or Dark Light. I
It's
can't
done by
remember.
Blumhouse, and Blumhouse they release a lot of shit. That's where the Gallows came from. But they sometimes uh, do good movies, especially recently.
Oh wow.
They did Get Out and they did Us recently. I think that was them. But anyway, um, it was a found footage film and it was scary as hell. Hang on, I'm going to see if I can find it. It was called not The Gift. The Gift wasn't found footage. Um, the Gift is a great movie. It's a very neat thriller.
I've
In
heard of
fact,
The Gift.
the book I'm working on now, it's called Napkins. It's a crime thriller, and I'm trying to make it sort of like that. But um, no, the movie I'm talking about is called The Creep. Uh, that's a good found footage film. It's about. Have you seen it?
Huh.
I think it's on Netflix. They made a Creep too,
No,
but
but
I
I
haven't
think I've
seen
heard of it.
the
I might
second
check
one.
it out
But
sometime.
it's about this guy who he's dying. I think he's dying of some type of cancer, and it's terminal. And so he invites this guy to his uh, secluded cabin to sort of film him and his life before his baby is born, because his wife is about to have a baby. But you never see the wife. At least I don't remember seeing the wife. It's been a while since I've seen the movie, but um, it
Right.
was really good. You know, it actually there was actually a reason that the camera was on, and this guy was just a very creepy, strange guy. Uh, Sort of like okay. So speaking of dumb movies, have you ever seen Tusk? Yeah, it's sort of like Human Centipede,
No, but I think I've heard of it.
but more ridiculous. Yeah, it's about
Oh wait.
this guy who hosts a
Yeah,
podcast,
I think I've heard of
and
it.
it's actually it was directed by Kevin Smith. Um, and there's a second one called Yoga Hosers,
Okay.
and then there's going to be a third one called Moose Jaws, which I'm looking forward to that one because that sounds ridiculous. Yeah, but
It does.
and the way
It
Kevin
kind of sounds
Smith
like an Urban
describes it is
Dictionary
like,
kind of
well, it's
thing.
like Jaws but with a moose. Okay, I'm down. I'm down. Okay, I'll, I'll, I'll watch this stupid shit. Anyway, Tusk is.
So
I
are we
think
gonna?
it's really entertaining, and it knows it's stupid. It knows it's a stupid movie. It's self-aware. But it's about this guy played by Justin Long, who hosts this podcast, and he hosts a podcast that just kind of like roasts people, and people send in clips and stuff of them, and he'll just roast them on the air. And what happens
Oh
is this
wow.
one kid ends up doing it, and he kills himself. So he goes off to Canada,
Oh
and I don't
shit.
remember his reason for going to Canada, But he goes up to Canada and he sees an ad in the bathroom by the urinal of this guy. Well, no, it said
For a good time call.
that he is an old man, an old war veteran who has a lifetime of stories and just wants somebody to sit and listen to his stories. And because this guy roasts people, he's like, okay, I'll go do that. Then you'll roast him on my show. So he goes up there and he meets with this old man. And there's something wrong with this old man. Like he has the bone of a walrus penis on his mantle. So he's a bit off. Anyway, he starts telling the story and he gives Justin Long some tea and stuff, and he drinks it, and Justin Long passes out. And I'm not spoiling anything. But when he wakes up and his legs are gone. They've been cut off above the knee. And the guy sort of explains what the reason for that. It has something to do with a walrus.
He got caught.
And if I tell you it's sort of like Human Centipede, you can draw your own conclusions. And it's such a stupid movie, but it knows it's stupid. Like when he's calling for help, he's like calling his fiance or whatever, and he's like, "I don't want to die in Canada," and it's just hilarious. Yeah. Oh, I watched it with.
I definitely gotta check that out.
One of my friends in college, while he was a bit stoned, and I was drinking really, really shitty honey apple cider that another friend gave me. Like, that shit was so bad that I had to chase it with the whiskey.
Oh, yeah.
But, yeah, we started watching Tusk, and
oh, damn.
I had to turn it off because I was freaking out. But it's not scary. It's sort of like,
Oh.
There are some members of Zoe's family who are like scarred by the Leprechaun movies. They're like scarred by the Leprechaun movies, and I was talking to him, and I'm like, I think it's hilarious. Like when he starts singing and jumping on that guy, killing him with the pogo stick in that movie. Like, I just think that's hilarious, and they look at me like I'm a madman. Yeah, it's funny, and it.
Well, it's because it is funny.
Tusk is the same way.
I mean, it may not be their kind of funny, but it's funny. Except it's a little more
over the top than Leprechaun.
Right. I mean, yeah, I'm definitely going to check that out at some point.
Well, we sure had a blast watching it. I'm trying to get Zoe to watch it with me, but she says no. It sounds stupid, and I'm like, that's the whole point. Of course, it's stupid. And same thing with Moose Jaws. Whenever that comes out, I'm going to watch it. Does it sound stupid? Yes. Sounds like the most ridiculous thing ever, and I'm going to love every minute of it.
That sounds like, I actually unironically want to watch that.
It's not wasted
because it sounds so ridiculous that it's funny, and if I get a good laugh out of it, then that's good enough. It was just like the whole dissecting the Dino Wolf thing. I mean, I guess there was some good to come out of it, even though the movie itself was trash. But at least there was some good to come out of it. Like, I got to dissect it and got to laugh at it. But see, the thing is, I don't even know if that movie was trying to be serious. If it is, then it's fucking.
Yeah.
Then it failed epically. But if it's intentionally stupid, then it did its job.
Yeah. Well,
I can only hope that it was intentionally stupid, because then it makes sense.
Yeah.
But some of the funniest things are actually attempts at being
Yeah,
serious.
I think I always kind of liked horror comedies, um, especially when they're done well, and even when they're done really, really badly, that can be entertaining.
Right.
Uh, uh, but Leprechaun was actually kind of at the
It
tail
really
end of
can
that
be.
little critters subgenre in the horror comedy. Because you had Gremlins, then you had a movie called Critters, and Ghoulie, and Troll was sort of a part of that as well, and Leprechaun sort of capped that off. Yeah, I like Gremlins. That's my favorite Christmas
Right.
movie
I remember.
because it is a
Yeah,
Christmas
Gremlins is
movie.
pretty good.
Yeah, I mean it's a Christmas movie.
It is a Christmas movie, just like Die Hard is.
In
Yeah,
fact, I got
technically
this
it is.
book. Um, I got this book called Secret Santa. I'm gonna go grab it. I got this book called Secret Santa, and it's supposed to be sort of like a play on that whole little critter genre. And it's about this young woman who works for this big
Right.
this publishing company, and what their her entire goal is to find the next Stephen King. And they do like this Christmas party, and everybody gets smashed or something.
Okay.
And they do like this Secret Santa exchange of gifts, and inside are these little creatures. It doesn't really say what they are, but the tagline is "The gift that keeps on giving." It's by Andrew Schaefer. It's by Andrew Schaefer. Andrew Schaefer does a lot of kind of funny parodies. Like he's got a book series out called the Obama Biden Mysteries, and it's a parody of Barack Obama and Joe Biden solving crimes, kind of
Oh.
like Scooby Gang kind of thing. Yeah, he writes that kind of stuff. So I can't. I imagine that it's going to be a pretty
That
funny
actually
book.
sounds pretty funny.
I bought it mostly because of the cover, because it's a gorgeous cover. Cover sale.
Right. They really do. I mean, that's it's just like back in the '80s when they started putting parental advisories on albums and shit. Kiss really capitalized on that because Gene Simmons was like,
Right.
okay, well, if they see that, it's gonna be all taboo and they're gonna
Right.
want it, so they bought it. While other bands were against putting the
Yeah.
label on it, Kiss capitalized
Well,
on it.
the first thing anybody sees is
So
the
it's that kind
cover
of
of the
concept, I
book,
guess.
and it has like that old. It's that retro 1980s, 1990s horror paperback book. That's what it. That's what it kind of looks like. It's vintage. It's retro, and that sells too because there's a sense of nostalgia there for a lot of people. Yeah. Well, it looks different
Yeah,
now if you
especially
compare it to
nowadays,
other
because that would sell pretty well now.
more modern horror covers. This one looks retro. It looks old, and it looks different now. But I once watched a video that's on YouTube, and it was a guy talking about how much the covers of horror books have changed. And he was like showing all these different covers of modern books. And he's like, can you tell which one of these books is a horror novel or a horror book? And it was kind of hard to tell. They all looked the same. But like back in the 80s, you could tell what was a horror book, what was a crime book, what was a literary novel. You could tell because of the cover. But now it's harder and harder to tell the difference in a lot of ways unless you know the name attached to it. Like if you know who Paul Tremblay is, then you know That's going to be a literary
Right.
horror novel. Or if you know who Stephen King is, which Stephen King doesn't really write horror anymore, not in the traditional sense anyway. Uh, but a Dean Koontz, that's a thriller
Right.
because you know the title, you know the name attached to it. Koontz, uh, yeah,
Yeah, and he's written some
I have an
he's written
entire
some pretty good
bookshelf
stuff too.
upstairs dedicated to
Yeah.
Koontz. I even have some really nice, rare Koontz books, and I'm not going to talk about what they are. But I was sort of burnt out on Koontz. I started reading his new Jane Hawk
Right.
series, which was sort of it was sort of James Bondsy in a sense, uh, but not really. I mean, it was they were thriller novels, suspense novels uh, that featured an FBI, a former FBI agent on the run. Because the first book's really good. It's called the Silent Corner,
Hmm. Oh, that sounds
and
interesting.
it is about. So there are these people who are close to certain people up in the government because it's a Dean Koontz book. It's got to have a government conspiracy because pretty much all of his books have that. But they're working up high in the government, or they know people. It's kind of like the Epstein thing, but before that whole thing blew up, this book came out. But it was sort of like the Epstein thing, and it was like there's like this chain, and you had
Right.
really happy people in their personal lives, uh, just uh, up and commit suicide. Like they're doing very mundane things, and they just up and start committing suicide. And Jane Hawk is the main character. She's the FBI agent. Her husband is one of them. So they're like eating dinner or something, and they got a kid and stuff. And he's like, "I'll be right back. I'm going to go to the bathroom." And he goes up there and he just blows his brains out. And so she starts uncovering that whole mystery. And the first book was really, really good. And I read the second book, and it was pretty good. And then I started the third book, which is called The Crooked Staircase. I started that book twice, and I could not get into it. I don't know what it was. There was just something about it, and it sort of turned me off of seeing Coons for a while. Um, yeah, I need to actually. I have a few more of his books because I get his
Right.
new
This
books
is
every
it's
time.
that point where you got burned out
Uh,
on it.
every time he releases a new book, it comes in the mail. I get it, and I have some of them that I haven't read. A stack over here. I need to start reading that. Um, yeah, I need to start getting back into Kuntz. And I had this book that I was gonna read over the holidays called Darkfall. It's called Darkfall, and it's sort of like a wintry book, and it's also like the Gremlins little thing of horror. It's got some voodoo in it, I think. I was gonna read that over the holidays, but I never got around to it. But I need
Right.
to get into that. I've also started collecting Goosebumps books. Yeah, yeah. I started buying a lot of those. Uh,
Oh yeah, those.
just because I think the covers are pretty. Again, covers sell.
Yeah, it's just like how just recently my family and we started collecting National Geographic magazines. The oldest issue I think we have, it's actually a hard copy, like a hardback. It's a hardback book that has a, it contains a lot of the
Ah,
issues from the year. 1915. So that's as old as we got as far as the National Geographics. Yeah, we actually have like a whole plastic tub full of National Geographics right now. We might need another one because we got I got some more in the car.
In the last couple years, I started collecting the hard case crime books, which I love that publishing company. They publish these. All their books are paperback. They're all paperback originals. But they got these really old school, like 1950s and 60s style hard boiled covers on them, and they re-release some of those old books. Like they've re-released a lot of books by Donald E. Westlake, who wrote as Richard Stark, also. But they're not releasing any of the Richard Stark books. They're just doing Westlake, and they've released a couple Stephen King books. The problem is Stephen King's books don't really fit in to what they're doing. That's like I just read the new one a couple weeks ago. It's called Later, and that's not a hard-boiled detective novel. There is an element of crime in it, but it's basically about a kid that can see dead people, and it's not really all. It's not really. It's sort of like The Sixth Sense,
right?
But it's also different because, for one thing, in that book, the dead can they can never, if you ask them a direct question, they can't lie to you. And that's how he's sort of roped into trying to solve crimes with this lady. But there's a whole nother element to that book, which I also won't spoil.
Okay.
But I will say this, and I don't want to overstate it because I feel like every time Stephen King comes out with a new book, especially since the movies came out recently, they compare it to it. Like when the Outsider came out in 2018, they're like, "Oh, it's like it." Well, no, it's not at all like it. When the Institute came out, they're like, "Oh, it's like it." No, it's not like it. Yeah, they compare just about everything he releases to it, and they did the same thing with Later.
Everyone likes to compare it to it, so.
Well, with Later,
even though it's a completely different kind of story,
writing a sequel to it. That is all I'm going to say. I'm not going to say. Well, I'll say one more thing. There's a serial killer in the book, and it happens fairly early on in the book. So I'm not spoiling much. They call him Thumper, and he ends up committing suicide. And he sort of haunts Jamie because the main character's name's Jamie. Usually what happens is after somebody dies, they only stay around 3 or 4 days, then they sort of cross over.
Right.
But this guy, he's not crossing over. And that's all I want to say about that. So we can move on from that. But it's a really good book.
Right. Well, we've been it sounds like a pretty interesting book. But yeah, like we've been recording for about 2.5 hours now. So if you want to just end it here, we definitely can. I mean, we've covered quite a bit of stuff. All right. Well, it's been a pleasure to having you on my first episode of this podcast.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Be open to doing it again.
Just want to say to all the listeners, thank you for tuning